Good afternoon, everyone. I am Judith Siegel, and I'm going to be doing the resident reading this afternoon. I was looking for a book, and passing one of the racks, I saw this title, High Tide in Tucson. Well, I was mystified by the high tide in Tucson and decided I would look further and saw some very lovely, humorous essays by Barbara Kingsolver. I'm going to start with The Muscle Mystique. The babysitter surely thought I was having an affair. Years ago, for a period of 3 months, I would dash in to pick up my daughter after work with my cheeks flushed, my heart pounding, my hair damp from a quick shower. I'm loath to admit where I'd really been for that last hour of the afternoon, but it's time to come clean. I joined a health club. I went downtown and sweated with the masses. I rode a bike that goes nowhere at the rate of 500 calories an hour. I even pumped a little iron. I can't deny the place was a licking ground. Guys stalking around the weight room like prairie chickens, nervously eyeing each other's pectorals. Over by the abdominal machine, I heard some of the frankest pickup lines since the 8th grade. You've got really defined deltoids for a girl. A truck perpetually parked out front had vanity plates that read, lift weights. Another one, press 250. I didn't recognize it as a vanity plate until I understood the prestige of bench pressing 250 pounds. I personally couldn't bench press a fully loaded steam iron. I didn't join the health club to lose weight or to meet the young Adonis who admire my dubiously defined deltoids. I am content with my lot in life, except for one irksome affliction. I am what's known in comic book jargon as the 98-pound weakling. I finally tipped the scales into 3 digits in my last year of high school, but weakling I've remained pretty much since birth. In polite terminology, I'm cerebral. The muscles between my ears are what I get by on. The last great body in my family was my grandfather Henry. He wore muscle shirts in the days when they were known as BVDs under his cotton workshop shirt, and his bronze tan stopped mid-biceps. He got those biceps by hauling floor joints and hammering up roof beams every day of his life, including his last. How he would have guffawed to see a room full of nearly naked bankers and attorneys, pale as plucked geese, heads down, eyes fixed on a horizon beyond the water cooler, pedaling like bats out of hell on bolted down bicycles. I expect he'd offer us all a job. If we paid our $30 a month to him, they could come out to the construction site and rub up and down ladders, bringing him nails. That's why I'm embarrassed about all this. I'm afraid I share his opinion of unproductive sweat. Actually, he'd be more amazed than scornful. His idea of fun was watching Ed Sullivan or snoozing in a recliner, or ideally, both at once. Why work like a maniac on your day off? To keep your heart and lungs in shape? Of course, but I haven't noticed any vanity plates that say, good lungs. The operative word here is vanity. Standards of beauty in every era are things that advertise, usually falsely, I'm rich and I don't have to work. How could you be a useful farmhand or even an efficient clerk typist if you have long painted fingernails? 4-inch high heels, like the bound feet of Chinese aristocrats, suggest you don't have to do anything efficiently, except maybe put up your tootsies on an ottoman and eat bonbons. And I'll point out here that aristocratic men wore the first high heels. In my grandmother's day, women of all classes lived in dread of getting a tan, since that betrayed a field worker station in life. But now that the field hand station is occupied by the office worker, a tan, I suppose, advertises that Florida and Maui are within your reach. Fat is another peculiar cultural flip-flop. Places where food is scarce, beauty is 3 inches of deep subcutaneous fat. But here and now, jobs are sedentary, and calories are relatively cheap, while the luxury of time to work them off is very dear. It still gives me pause to see an ad for a weight loss program that boldly enlists, first 10 pounds come off free. But that is about the size of it in this strange, food-drenched land of ours. After those first 10, it gets expensive. As a writer, I could probably do my job with no deltoids at all, or biceps or triceps, so long as you left me those vermicelli-sized muscles that lift fingers to the keyboard. My vermicellis are very well defined, so when I've written my piece off, I should merely go to build a body that says, I don't really have a financial obligation to sit here in video terminal bondage. Well, yes, but to tell the truth, the leisure body and even the go lungs are not really what I was after when I signed up at Pecs R Us. What I craved and longed for still is to be strong. I've never been strong. In childhood, team sports were my most reliable source of humiliation. I've been knocked breathless to the ground by softballs, basketballs, volleyballs, and once during a wildly out-of-hand game of Red Rover, a sneaker. In every case, I knew my teammates were counting on me for a volley or a double play or anyhow something more than clutching my stomach and rolling on the grass. But by the time I reached junior high, I wasn't even the last one picked anymore. I'd slunk away long before they got to the bottom of the barrel. Even now, the great mortification of my life is that visitors to my home sometimes screw the mustard and pickle jar lids back so tightly I can't get them open. The visitors probably think they are just closing them enough to keep the bugs out. Sure, I could use a pipe wrench, but it's embarrassing. Once my front gate stuck, and for several days I could only leave home by clambering furtively through the bougainvillea and over the garden wall. When a young man knocked on my door to deliver flowers one day, I threw my arms around him. He thought that was pretty emotional for florists' mums. He had no idea he just casually pushed open the Berlin Wall. My inspiration down at the health club was a woman firefighter who could have knocked down my garden gate with a karate chop. I still dream about her triceps, but I've mostly gotten over my brief fit of muscle envy. Oh, I still make my ongoing creative stabs at bodybuilding. I do girl push-ups and some of the low-impact things from Jane Fonda's Pregnant Lady Workout book, even if I'm not. And finally, my friends have given me an official item of exercise equipment that looks like a glob of blue putty, which you're supposed to squeeze 1,000,000 times daily to improve your grip. That's my current program. The so-called non-competitive atmosphere of the health club whipped me hands down. Realistically, I've always known I was born to be the before picture. So I won't be seen driving around with plates that boast press 250. Maybe open jars. So we think we've all been there with the jars. And the next essay I'm going to read is The Not So Deadly Sin. All of you can figure out which one that is. Write a nonfiction book and be prepared for the legion of readers who are going to doubt your facts. But write a novel and get ready for the world to assume that every word is true. Whenever I'm queried about my fiction, If people want to know something in particular, they nearly always want to know the same thing. How much is autobiographical? Did it really happen in exactly that way? Was my childhood like that? Which character is me? Commonly, people don't ask, they just assume. I get letters of sympathy for the loss of my sister, the heroine of one of my novels, and the loss of my father, ditto, same novel. Since one of my characters adopted a Cherokee child, I get advice about cross-cultural adoptions and so on. My sister and husband are alive and well, thanks. I don't have an adopted child. The mute waif named Turtle, who appears in 2 of my novels, is the polar opposite of my own Camille, a sunny, blonde child who spoke her first word at 8 months and hasn't stopped talking since. At the time I invented Turtle, I had no child at all. Mine came later, and I didn't find her in a car, as happened in The Bean Trees. Mine was harder to produce. I never used my own family and friends as the basis of fictional characters, mainly because I would like them to remain my family and friends, and secondarily, because I believe the purpose of art is not to photocopy life, but to still it, learn from it, improve on it, embroider tiny disjunct pieces of it into something insightful and entirely new. As Marc Chagall said, great art picks up where nature leaves off. I know in real life many fascinating people. Every one of them has limits on what she or he can be talked into. Most, in fact, will ask for recommendations on their love lives or their vacation plans, then reliably do the opposite. When I'm writing a story, I can't mess around with that kind of free spirit. I need characters I can count on to do what I say. Take on a foundling baby rather than call the police. Fall in love with my self-effacing heroine rather than the sturdy, good-looking divorcee down the street. Pursue a passion for cockfighting and then give it all up at a lover's request. Die for honor. Own up to guilt. What's more, they must all do it convincingly. That means they have to be carrying in their psyches all the right motives, the exact combination of past experiences that will lead them to their appointment with my contrived epiphany. Trying to graft a plot onto the real-life history of anyone I actually know, including myself, would be as fruitless as lashing a citrus branch onto the trunk of an apple tree. It would look improbable. It would wither and die. Better to plant a seed in the good dirt of imagination. Grow a whole story from scratch. Most people readily acknowledge the difference between life and art. Why, then, do so many artists keep answering the same question again and again? No, none of these characters is me. It's not my life. I made it up. Yes, all of it. Strangers' assumptions about deaths in my family and the like, odd as this might seem, have caused us some genuine pain. How I wish my art could stand apart from us, carrying no more suggestions about my private life than the work of, say, a stonemason or a tree surgeon. I was raised to be polite, but sometimes I'm inclined to get cranky and bark about this. Give us writers a little credit, will you? We're not just keeping a diary here, we're inventing. Why can't you believe we're capable of making up a story from scratch, of stringing together a long, elaborate lie, for heaven's sake? When it's put that way, it dawns on me that this may be the snag, the part about lying. In the book Jacket Photos, I look like a decent girl, and decent girls don't lie. That social axiom runs deep, possibly deeper than any other. The first important moral value we teach our children after "don't hit your sister" is the difference between fantasy and truth. Trying to pass off one for the other is a punishable infraction and a lesson that sticks for life. Whether or not we are perfectly honest in adulthood, we should be. And we know that on a visceral level. We don't even have to think about it. Our hearts know. So I suppose I should be relieved when people presume my stories are built around a wholesome veracity. They're saying, in fact, you don't look like a sociopath. And it's true, I'm not. I pay my taxes and don't litter. Track down any grade school teacher who knew me in childhood, and she'll swear I was a goody two-shoes even back then. But ask my mother, and she'll tell you I always had a little trouble with the boundaries of truth. As the aerospace engineers say, I pushed the envelope. As a small child, I gave my family regular updates on the white horse wearing a hat that lived in the closet. When I was slightly older, family vacations offered me the delightful opportunity to hang out alone in campground restrooms, intimating to strangers that I came from a foreign country and didn't comprehend English or plumbing. When I got old enough to use public transportation by myself, my sport was to entertain other passengers with melodramatic personal histories that occurred to me on the spot. I was a 19-year-old cello virtuoso running away from my dreadful 70-year-old husband. Or I had a brain tumor and was determined to see every state in the Union by Greyhound in the remaining 2 months of my life. Or I was a French anthropologist working with a team that had just discovered the real cradle of human origins in a surprising but as yet undisclosable location. Oh, how my fellow passengers' eyes would light up. People 2 rows ahead of me would put down their paperbacks, sling an envelope over the back of the seat, and ride all the rest of the way to Indianapolis backward, asking questions. I probably registered an increased heart rate and sweaty palms, but I couldn't stop myself. I strove for new heights in perjury, trying to see how absurd a yarn I could spin, before some matron would finally frown at me over her specs and say, "Now really, dear." No one ever did. I concluded that people want pretty desperately to be entertained, especially on long bus rides through flat Midwestern cornfields. For me, it was more than a pastime. It was the fulfillment of my own longing to reach through the fences that circumscribed my young life and taste other pastures. Through my tales, I discovered not exactly myself, but all the selves I might have been. None of them was me, but each of them was a beckoning path into the woods of what might have been. Eventually, I found a socially acceptable outlet for my depravity. Now I spend hours each day, year after year, sitting at my desk with a wicked smirk on my face, making up whopping 400-page lies. Oh, what a life. I do want to state for the record that I no longer have any inclination toward real dishonesty. I don't bear false witness to strangers or to friends, and I check my facts obsessively when serving the journalist or essayist trade. So my mother isn't to blame. She did evidently teach me to know the true from the false. I guess I was just born with an excess of story, the way another poor child might come into this world with extra fingers on each hand. My imagination had more figment in it than my life could contain, so some of it leaked out here and there. As I've matured, I've learned to control the damage. I don't believe I'm extraordinary on this account. Every one of us, I think, is born with an excess of story. Listen quietly to a group of toddlers at play. The lies will swarm around their heads thick as a tribe of bright butterflies, flickering gracefully from one child to another, till they notice a grown-up has come into the room, and in a sudden rush of wings, the lies will vanish into air. A little bit sad, isn't it? If you look it up, you'll find lying was never registered as one of the 7 deadly sins. Pride, an anemic sin, if you ask me, is on that list, and so is gluttony and, of all things, sloth, but not lying. Yet, in the age of evidence and reason, it has gotten such a very bad name. When so many smart, lively people keep insisting to me that all my stories must be true, I begin to suspect that they can't quite get their minds around the notion of pure fabrication. I'm going to have an editorial aside here. This was written in 1995. I want to tell them, stop a minute right where you are. Relax your shoulders, shake your head, and spine like a dog shaking off cold water. Tell that imperious voice in your head to be still. Then close your eyes and tap the well. Find the lie you are longing to tell. It's in there. When you manage to wrestle that first one out, a whole flood will gush out behind it. Take them up in your hands, drink their clarity, write them down in a secret book. Tell them to your children behind the golden door of once upon a time. Or take a long bus trip through the cornfields. You may find a new career. So, I think I'll do one more short one, and then I think we'll call it a day. And this one I had to read just because of the title, called Life Without Go-Go Boots. Fashion nearly wrecked my life. I grew up beyond its pale, convinced that this would stunt me in some irreparable way. I don't think it has, but for a long time it was touch and go. We lived in the country in the middle of an alfalfa field. We had no immediate access to Bobby Brooks sweaters. I went to school in the hand-me-downs of a cousin 3 years older. She had excellent fashion sense, but during the 3-year lag, her every sleek outfit turned to a pumpkin. In 5th grade, when girls were wearing straight shifts with buttons down the front, I wore pastel shirtwaists with cap sleeves and a multitude of built-in petticoats. My black lace-up Oxfords, which my parents perceived to have orthopedic value, carried their own weight in the spectacle. I suspect people noticed, and I knew it for sure on the day that Billy Stamps announced to the lunch line, "Make way for the Bride of Frankenstein." I suffered quietly, casting an ever-hopeful eye on my 8th grade cousin, whose button-front shift someday would be mine. But by the time I was an 8th grader, everyone with an iota of social position wore polka-dot shirts and miniskirts. For Christmas, I begged for go-go boots. The rest of my life would be endurable if I had a pair of those white, calf-high confections with the little black heels. My mother, though always inscrutable near Christmas, seemed sympathetic. There was hope. Never mind that those little black heels are like skate blades in inclement weather. I would walk on air. On Christmas morning, I received white rubber boots with treads like a pair of Michelins. My mother loved me, but had missed the point. In high school, I took matters into my own hands. I learned to sew. I contrived to make an apple green polyester jumpsuit that was supremely fashionable for about 2 months. Since it took me 40 days and 40 nights to make the thing, my moment of glory was brief. I learned what my mother had been trying to tell me all along. High fashion has a shelf life of potato salad, and when past its prime, it is similarly deadly. Once I left home and went to college, I was on my own, fashion-wise, having bypassed my cousin in stature and capped the arrangement off by moving to another state. But I found I still had to reckon with life's limited choices. After classes, I worked variously as a house cleaner, typesetter, and artist's model. I could spend my wages on trendy apparel, which would be useless to me in any of my jobs, particularly the latter. We weren't we won't ask why, or on the lesser gratifications of food and textbooks. It was a tough call, but I opted for education. This was Indiana, and it was cold, and when it wasn't cold, it was raining. I bought an Army surplus overcoat with zip-out lining that reached my ankles, and I found in my parents' attic a green pith helmet. I became a known figure on campus. Fortunately, this was the era in which Army boots were a fashion option for co-eds, and besides, who knew? Maybe under all that all-weather olive, there was a Bobby Brooks sweater. My social life picked up. As an adult, I made two hugely fortuitous choices in the women's wear department. First, I moved out west, where the buffalo roam and hardly anyone is ever arrested for being unstylish. Second, I became a novelist. Artists, also mathematicians and geniuses, are greatly indulged by society when it comes to matters of grooming. If we happen to look like an unmade bed, it's presumed we're preoccupied with plot devices or unifying theories or things of that sort. Even so, when I was invited to attend an important author event on the East Coast, a friend took me in hand. Writers are supposed to be eccentric, I wailed. My friend, one of the people who loves me best in the world, replied, "Barbara, you are not eccentric, you're an anachronism," and marched me down to an exclusive clothing shop. It was a very small store. I nearly hyperventilated. "You could liquidate the stock here and feed an African nation for a year," I whispered. But under pressure, I bought a suit and wore it to the important author function. For 3 hours of my life, I was precisely in vogue. Since then, it has rained in my closet from its dry cleaner bag, feeling very unhappy and out of place. I am sure a silk ambassador assigned to a flannel republic. I'm always afraid I'll spill something on it. I'd be too nervous to enjoy myself. It turns out I would rather converse than make a statement. Now, there is fashion and there is style. The latter I have found will serve and cost less. Style is merely a matter of acting as if you know very well what you look like, thanks, and are just delighted about it. It also requires consistency. A friend of mine wears buckskin moccasins every day of her life. She has daytime and evening moccasins. This works fine in Arizona. But when my friend fell in love with a Tasmanian geologist and prepared to move to a rainforest, I worried. Moccasins instantly decompose in wet weather. But I should have known my friend has sense. She bought clear plastic galoshes to button over her moccasins and writes me that she's happy. I favor cowboy boots. I don't do high heels because you might actually have to go somewhere. Cowboy boots say, "I'm no fancy pump, and furthermore, so what?" This characterizes my whole uniform. In fact, oversized flannel shirts, jeans or cotton leggings, and cowboy boots when weather permits. I'm also a parent, which of course calls into question every decision one ever believes one has made for the last time. Can I raise my daughter as a raiment renegade? At present, she couldn't care less. Maybe obsessions skip a generation. She was blessed with 2 older cousins, whose sturdy hand-me-downs she has worn from birth with relish. If she wasn't entirely a fashion plate, she also escaped being typecast. For her first 2 years, she had no appreciable hair, to which parents can clamp those plastic barrettes that are the gender-dead giveaways. So when I took her to the park in Cousin Ashley's dresses, strangers commented on her blue eyes and lovely complexion. When she wore Andrew's play suits emblazoned with trucks and airplanes. And why is it that we only decorate our boys with modes of transportation? People always commented on how strong and alert my child is. And what is it? That's his name. This interests me. I also know it can't last. She's in school now, and I'm quickly remembering what school is about. 2 parts ABCs to 50 parts Where Do I Stand in the Great Pecking Order of Humankind. She has a dress-up collection to die for, gleaned from Goodwill and her grandparents' world travels, and likely as not will show up to dinner wearing hair and pants, bunny ears, a glittered bra over her T-shirt, wooden shoes, and a fez. But underneath it all, she's only human. I have a feeling the day might come when my daughter will beg to be a slave of conventional fashion. I'm inclined to resist if it happens, to press on her the larger truths I finally absorbed from my own wise parents, that she can find her own path, that she will be more valued for inward individuality than outward conformity, that a world plagued by poverty can ill afford the planned obsolescence of haute couture. But a small corner of my heart still harbors the bride of Frankenstein, 11 years of age, haunting me in her brogues and petticoats. Always and forever, the ghosts of past anguish compel us to live through our children. If my daughter ever asks for the 90s equivalent of go-go boots, I'll cave in. Maybe I'll also buy her some of those clear plastic galoshes to button over them on inclement days. Well, the end, and thank you so very much. And if you want to read this book, I'm going to put it back on one of the racks where I found it, and it's called High Tide in Tucson by Barbara Kingsolver. Thank you so much.